Okay, welcome back. It is Monday, the beginning of another challenging week for all of us in many different ways. Taking a quick look at the California fire situation before we bring on Dane Wiggington here in just a couple of minutes. We're going to elaborate on many things. A news conference was just held an hour ago. Officials monitoring the deadly camp fire in Northern California, the Paradise Fire, did talk about that. The death toll now apparently all together or just the Paradise, I'm not sure. It's unclear in these stories. At least 44 people have died altogether now, and probably 150 are still unaccounted for. Maybe more. No one knows for sure. But this is certainly the deadliest fire in memory, if not of them all. Officials have launched a website where residents can view an online damage assessment map. They said the data is subject to change there, of course, as information is gathered and verified. The California Highway Patrol said numerous vehicles blocking roadways are being cleared now. It's a slow process. And a meteorologist for the National Weather Service noted there is no sign of rain in the forecast through this week and possibly through Thanksgiving. That is the big story. That is the drought. That is geoengineering and weather control that may or may not be out of control. We don't know. We do know they are playing games with Mother Nature. Dane Wiggington is standing by, the world's foremost authority and expert on this and other subjects of similar bent. We should say rain before Thanksgiving, very unlikely. I looked at my forecast here. I didn't see any significant rain until the end of the month. So there's nothing going on. As fall wanes into winter, what do we have? We've got a drought, and it's getting worse. Let's go and talk to Dane Wiggington now. Hello, Dane. Welcome. Thanks for coming. And you called this. You called it earlier. Couple months ago. It's going to get worse before it gets better, if it ever does get better again.
Thank you for your continued efforts to sound the alarm, Jeff, on every front. And on this situation in California, it's exactly what we said would happen, had to happen if climate engineering operations continued to expand and be deployed at the scale they are. In regard to the drought, Jeff, there's a significant amount of moisture that's trying to flow toward the state now, but it hits the ridiculously resilient ridge and is deflected northward. You've probably seen those. I saw it
today. Just for you listening, if you can, go find a weather map, satellite pictures of the eastern Pacific off the coast of the U.S. and Canada. An enormous, beautiful, otherwise beautiful, spiraling weather front has come again across the Pacific and run into the wall. And it turned into a vertical, straight up and down cloud band that was, it just looked like a wall, exactly like what it hit.
It is. And at this point, thankfully, much of the higher up officials in the firefighting agencies are now starting to allude to the fact that they know something is radically wrong. I do know people in some of the state fire agencies that are helping to circulate some information. They're very cautious and careful because the state's funding ultimately comes from the central bankers. As you know, the state's California is short about $50 billion every year. Nobody asks where that deficit goes every year. So that those at the top that control the purse strings, ultimately the central bankers control everything all the way down the line. So everybody, including down to the local fire agencies, pretend that the climate engineering elephant in the sky isn't there because it affects their paychecks and pensions. But we have to get around that. We are so close to hitting the wall at full velocity. We need people within academia to evaluate what matters and what doesn't to this point. And the only thing that matters now, if we're going to take any leap in the right direction, is to expose and halt climate engineering. We simply have to get to that point, Jeff. And how bad does it have to get before people will acknowledge the elephant in the sky?
What you said a minute ago is interesting. We need people in academia. And I'll tag that with, we need people in academia to start being honest and stop hiding behind their grant and everything else that is part of the system, and talk in reality. We can't keep pretending like something isn't wrong. And, you can assign the blame apparently to several different sources. We know what's going on, but let's get these academicians to start being honest and upfront. It's way overdue. Most of them, to me, are cowards. I'm sorry to say it, but that's the word I would put on them.
I would fully agree with you. And this is what's imperative for people to remember, even activists or those that do look at independent news. It's important to prioritize what is the most important issue, what is the single greatest and most immediate threat we face. And even then, and mathematically that is climate engineering short of nuclear cataclysm. And again, connecting that to Fukushima, and which the same facilities used for climate engineering, like ionosphere heaters, data supports the conclusion that those same transmission stations, microwave transmission stations, were also utilized and are frequently utilized to create seismic activity. As we've discussed before, Jeff, the MIT reported the extremely anomalous and inexplicable atmospheric heating for the Japanese quake directly above the Fukushima epicenter in the days prior to the quake. So we're talking about scenarios that are all intertwined, but this is important for listeners and activists to understand that many are still not grasping the gravity and the immediacy of what's unfolding. Even people in the alternative news community are not fully grasping the immediacy. And it's not that we wake up tomorrow and the planet stops supporting life overnight, although that is perilously close. But at the moment in time, the power structure can no longer hide the severity of what's unfolding from the population. Our reality will change at that moment. Power structure will play some very big cards. I would argue that is very close, could happen tomorrow.
This this entire fire season, from, I guess we could start with Santa Rosa, this could go on, unfortunately, right through the winter, if we even have a winter.
It could. They can block our rain as long as they choose. As we stated at geoengineeringwatch.org, from the inception of our site a decade ago, the climate engineers absolutely control the spigot. We have so many examples of this from every single Middle Eastern country that was named after 9/11 to be toppled.
Yeah.
You know, all of them undergoing a once in 1,000 year drought. Militaries of some of those countries, as I know you know, in Iran, they're acknowledging the fact that the NATO, Israel, and NATO involved with shutting off their precipitation. They're not guessing. They're not speculating. They can see what's happening.
Sure.
Satellite imaging and radar as we can. So bottom line, and this is a weapon of war, we can speculate as to all the agendas being carried out, for example, in what's happening in California, but this is not speculation. It is a direct result of climate engineering operations, which includes ionosphere heaters that create these pressure zones. So that is beyond dispute at this point.
I couldn't agree more. The idea that the climate is being messed with doesn't sit well with a lot of people. They just can't entertain it. That's okay. But those of you listening already get it. I remember, I don't know how many years ago it's been now, 6, 7, 8. I watched, as you did, the weather satellite pictures of these storms moving across the Pacific and watched them come across, run into the wall or the ridge, whatever you want to call it, and literally disintegrate. And then I got on, and it's on the homepage. If you look on the right-hand side and scroll down, you'll see a big red eye. That's the hurricane. That was Hurricane Lane, the one that was headed toward Oahu. And I was very lucky, and I got a satellite picture. At the moment that Lane was stopped in its tracks and squashed, and you need to go look at that, all of you who haven't seen it. Understand that this is how they do it. Even with hurricanes, that storm was slowed down and stopped in its tracks before it could hit Oahu and all the military installations on Oahu, especially Pearl, and it was then hit with an enormous dose of EMF, and you can see how on about almost 300 degrees around the circle of the eye are radiating straight clouds. They're like sticks, and they go out. It looks like a sunrise, a characteristic of a sunrise. They look like beams or rays. And if you look closely at each one of these rays of moisture that have been squashed and forced out of the eye, they have saw-toothed edges on them. That doesn't happen. That's not normal. Sawtoothed edges. You can see them. Just scroll down on Rense, look on the right-hand side, look for the hurricane in the featured stories, look at the pictures. It's right there. They could not have this hurricane run into Pearl Harbor and the other military installations on Oahu and sustain the damage and interruptions. We don't know what they've got going on there, but it's a hell of a lot. That story should tell you pretty much all you need to know. And at the bottom of that story, I believe I've got a link to that series of Pacific storms that I tracked and put together in picture form, how they ran into this high-pressure ridge and disseminated and just were dispersed. They're gone. I think that's at the bottom of that featured story on the hurricane.
Well, certainly there's no question that nothing goes without being manipulated at this point. What's important for people to understand too, Jeff, and this is part of what's connected to the ridiculously resilient ridge that is spinning our moisture, as you just correctly stated, straight up and over around that clockwise rotating high pressure ridge, back down into the lower 48, where that moisture is being used to chemically ice nucleate and create surface cool downs, short-term toxic surface cool downs. So right now, looking at the current satellite radar imagery right now, there's snow flurries in small portions of northern Mexico, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, the Dakotas, Oklahoma. I could go on and on. Very wide scattering, not much falling. But again, this is indicative of when that moisture is sent up, over, and around us, chemically nucleated, it begins to cool it down so that they can create a surface cool down, and it's dispersed over a much wider area. That's part of the solar radiation management process with microwave transmitters, which cause the atmospheric particulates to repel in every direction, so they scatter in the widest possible area. So we have, as we've covered at geoengineeringwatch.org again and again and again, the freeze-fry scenario. Baking the West under domes of high pressure, wildfires, while the East Coast is inundated with excessive moisture and chemically nucleated scenarios. So we have a section now, Jeff, at the top toolbar at geoengineeringwatch.org. It's Engineering Winter. I would encourage listeners to look at that and understand that with the climate engineering issue, that is a very central part to understand. They are engineering cool downs. These cool downs are not natural. That's where the weather whiplash comes from. They're highly toxic, by the way, and we've had several experts, one very highly credentialed microbiologist from University of New York that has written to us that he immediately became ill after being exposed to the rain, absolutely attributes it to whatever was in the rain. We have a degreed forester from Ohio, same situation, documented quite thoroughly. So I would advise your listeners to stay out of the rain.
We'll talk more about that in a minute. I'm looking at this story on Hurricane Lane, the one I'm describing to you, that has the radiating clouds sticking out from it. It's right to the right of headline news, the start of headline news at Rense Alt News. Just go over there and look at it. And when you see this picture, you're going to be amazed. How could they do it? Well, they might as well have taken an enormous electromagnetic EMF boot and just stomped on this hurricane. That's exactly what it looks like. And then it falls into little tiny pieces thereafter. So, yeah, and at the very bottom, you can find a link. Here's what I wrote. You might also remember that several years ago, as we reported with satellite proof, how storm after storm coming across the Pacific from west to east were crushed before making it to California, Oregon, and Washington in very similar fashion as what you just saw done to Hurricane Lane. Go here for a look, and you can click on that link and bring up those other weather systems that were just shredded. These people don't mess around. It's not a guessing game. This is a fine art now. They can steer hurricanes. They can create hurricanes. They can enhance or diminish or stop and destroy hurricanes. Okay? The proof is right here. Go ahead, Dane.
They certainly can. To look at a statistical example, Jeff, we all remember the 2005-2006 hurricane season when there was a tremendous amount of damage done. Then a 12-year, many people don't realize this still, a 12-year major hurricane landfall drought in the U.S., and then, again, cataclysmic damage in the last year. So this is the make or break scenario that they can create with the cyclones. Now, it's important for people to remember and consider that the nature is fully capable of spawning hurricanes with and I know you know this, with the superheated oceans that we have, but But they can, as you just correctly stated, if they create the correct pressure zones, they certainly are capable of helping to spawn a cyclone and then certainly steering it. And Jeff, what we see in the Atlantic, and you've noted this too, I'm sure, that the cyclones are, as they're crossing the Atlantic, they're often knocked down in strength, which makes them easier to steer. And then you see the forecast for the rapid intensification. That's a term that they now use often, right before they hit landfall, correct?
Yeah.
Because that's when they've reached the point they want them to be at. The storm can strengthen, and it's steering is not so much an issue then. They have ground-based transmitters on the continental U.S., which we've documented at GeoEngineering Watch again and again. Those transmitters, if you look at the function of them, you can search GeoEngineering Watch Hurricane Harvey, GeoEngineering Watch Hurricane Maria, and you can see the animations we've recorded of those ground-based transmitters repel the circulation of the storm. So where those transmitters shut down
right.
is where the storms tend to migrate to, and then they're pushed from behind as the transmitters re-energize, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Certainly it does. Please do look at the hurricane lane destruction. Understand this is the same kind of technology that's used to do what Dane just described with hurricanes coming out of the Atlantic. These systems don't all have to come from Alaska. They have portable systems. How many HARP-type transmitters do you think we have now?
The large ground base on the scale that the facility in Glaucona, Alaska is, we think there may be somewhere in the vicinity of 100. And the SBX sea-based X-band radar, we have numerous facilities there. And then the ground-based facilities, again, stress to your listeners, those that are fighting the cell phone repeaters, rightfully so, consider that those repeaters, the amount of microwave transmission they put out for weather manipulation is exponentially higher than what's being used for cell phone transmission. So I hope those that are fighting the radio frequencies do take into consideration that those transmissions being used for weather mod are much, much more powerful even than cell phone transmissions.
Are you suggesting that maybe some of the overpowered cell phone towers might be used in some kind of an aggregate to act like a HARP system?
There's no question. Now, this is different than HARP, though.
I understand. Yeah.
The ground, they're certainly being used in weather mod, and there's no speculation about that. We can see the effect on precipitation radar, but these are not ionosphere heaters, as you know. This is a ground-based transmission that tends to broadcast out in every direction. These are very visible on the animations that we have, and that can cause the particulates to repel in every direction to further disperse and scatter them, and that's part of the objectives of solar radiation management. But again, they are pulling out all the stops on the scope and scale of these programs. All the polar regions plug into this equation. What's happening in the poles is very directly related to what's happening in the states. And the wildfires that happened over summer, Jeff, we recorded this at geoengineeringwatch.org with ample data to back up the conclusion that wildfire smoke is indeed was used over the summer as a last-ditch stopgap measure to provide some shading in the Arctic, temporary cooling at the cost of an even worse overall warming. I would encourage people to look at this report at geoengineeringwatch.org. We have science study to back up the fact that wildfire smoke indeed has a profound cooling effect on the Arctic, and was even suggested in a science study as being used for a moderating factor for cooling the Arctic. So when we have fires, conditions that were established by climate engineering, without question, 600 plus fires in BC, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and this smoke ended up in the Arctic because of the Coriolis effect. There is ample data to conclude that this is a whole card for the climate engineers. Incinerate forests to saturate the atmosphere with enough particulates to provide temporary cooling at the cost of ensuring that we are headed toward near-term planetary omnicide. They are not doing this for the common good. This is a matter of trying to mask the severity of what's unfolding from the population till the last possible moment at the expense of ensuring that nothing is left. That's the course we are on.
Wow. Geoengineeringwatch.org, Dane's site. It's a must. You need to bookmark that and check with it often. He just sent me an AccuWeather.com picture of the U.S. and these little spots of snow, like little tiny dots, all up and down the Midwest. Just crazy. That is so unnormal. And so weird that, and I've been watching weather satellite pictures since they put the first weather satellite up. made those available to us. This is just crazy now.
So we have snow falling right now. We have warm rain straight out of the Gulf of Mexico going up the eastern seaboard.
Yeah.
But somehow we have snow falling in a dozen and a half states across the country, and very, very
it's minimal.
Lightly
it's light,
scattered.
very light.
Exactly.
It's like a little drizzle. It's nothing.
Exactly. And that's what we'd expect with climate engineering. You have too many condensation nuclei. Their goal is to spread this material over the widest possible area to create the broadest effect. But as you correctly stated, Jeff, completely unnatural.
Wow. There's another area that we need to get into, and we'll do it. I got a break coming up here in another minute or two, but we'll talk about that as well. When you see a fire burning and you see the smoke, and some of these clouds are enormously tall, threatening, ugly. They look like a Hollywood FX kind of a thing, especially the one over Malibu that came from the Woolsey fire, moving right from east to west, right out over Malibu, all the way across Ventura County, from the location in Canoga Park and Simi Valley up in the mountains, all the way out over the ocean. And that was one huge cloud of smoke. We saw the same kind of thing, although I think this was even more ferocious than we did in Santa Rosa. The idea that you need to keep in mind is that Fukushima has been with us coming up on 8 years. That means 8 years of radionuclides have been brought across the Pacific, either in the water or in the atmosphere, and dumped all over the U.S. from coast to coast. There's nowhere to hide from it. It's everywhere. And where has it gone for 8 years? Did it fall on the ground and then just kind of dissipate, break up, and vanish? No. Radionuclides will hang around sometimes for 50,000, 100,000 years, depending on which one you're talking about. They're all here. Where did they go? They came over here and they fell down on the ground in the rain. Where did the rain take them? Into the soil. And what happened next? They came up through the roots of trees and shrubs and agriculture crops and into the plants themselves. Yes. So what happens when those plants burn? Well, we'll tell you more about that when we come back. Hold on. Okay, let's get right back to it. We have a lot to talk about in this next half hour with Dane Wiggington, GeoEngineeringWatch.org. I just looked at AccuWeather again for our area here, and that big weather system, which should, by all rights, be dumping certainly reasonable amounts of rain on us right now, is just sitting off the coast, just moving in a little bit. It's been just basically wrung out like a wet dish rag. It's got nothing left in it. The rest of the week, 63 tomorrow, partly sunny. 62 the next day, cloudy. 63, mostly sunny. 63, clouds and sunshine. 63, plenty of sunshine, mild. Partial sunshine, delightful. That's it for the week. These big weather systems are just being destroyed. And it's got to stop. Sooner or later, they've got to stop. I don't know how they're going to be stopped, but it's crazy. Now, what I was saying before, let me draw your attention to the top of headline news. Look up the third story down. The first two are about Korea. And Kim is hiding secret missile bases in North Korea. Big surprise, huh? Isn't Trump clever? All right. Southern California, fire released deadly radiation and toxins from burned over Rocketdyne and spread by smoke. That's a story I put together today for all of you who care. You must understand that whether we're talking about the Paradise Fire, about the horrible fire in Redding, about, well, the wine country fires, I guess there were a couple of those. It doesn't matter which fire you're talking about. Now we move down to Rocketdyne, but the others don't need a Rocketdyne to have radiation in the smoke. They have been, in many cases, burning vegetation that for the last almost 8 years has been uptaking radioactive nuclides from Fukushima by way of the rain and the wind in the soil and up into their trunks, their branches, their leaves. They even found in the first year after Fukushima radiation in the pine needles of pine trees, conifers, up and down the West Coast. Nobody talked about it except UC Berkeley, and then they were shut down after about 6 months of putting out some pretty good reports. They were said, no more. because the graph kept going up and up and up, more and more. They were reporting on soil, on crops, on groundwater, all kinds of things, and they were finding exactly what I just told you. So this fire, when it burned over Rocketdyne in Canoga Park, above the hills there by Simi Valley, or Simi Valley, as we used to say, picked up a ton of radioactive nuclides and carried them where? Due southwest across Ventura County into the Malibu area and out to sea. And all the way it was dropping stuff. And all these firefighters, Dane, that are sent into these things are inhaling the smoke. And nobody bothers to think about the toxicity and the quite probable radioactivity that is in the smoke. It's there.
Well, how many people claim to care about the first responders, but does the government? And let's look at 9/11, Jeff. You know how many first responders were told to go into that site when the EPA knew it was incredibly toxic?
That woman knew. I watched her make that address. She knew.
Absolutely. So it's no different now. And on the Rocketdyne site, the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, it's SSFL. That's
what it's called now. Yeah. Oh, by the way, it's owned by Boeing and the Department of Energy. Think about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Alliance of criminality, but there was ongoing problems there, as you know. There was a very high amount of unusual pediatric diseases related to that. I think 50 plus there, and so the toxins are really without question there as the fire moves through and incinerates them. How could they not become airborne? And certainly they are.
They go right up.
So
the cancer rate in the surrounding residential areas, miles of Bell Canyon especially was the worst, is over 60%. The residents know it. They know where it came from. They know why they have cancer, but they can't seem to move away from there. The home values probably are very low. Nobody wants to move in there. But you got a cancer rate of over 60%. The Rocketdyne facility had, according to one report, 9 different nuclear test facilities, secret, put in that facility. It's like 500 acres 2,800 acres. That's what it is. And one of them in 1959 that we know about melted down in what is still called to this day the worst nuclear accident in American history. You don't know about that. You think 3 Mile Island, perhaps, and you think about Fukushima, but nobody knows about what happened at Rocketdyne. And it is now said that 4 of the 9 nuclear installations there had radioactive leakage at one point or another from either a meltdown or some other problem. But the big one in 1959, unquestionably, is called the worst nuclear accident in American history. Look it up if you don't believe me. So what I did is put together in this top story, Southern California fire released deadly radiation and toxins from burned over Rocketdyne and spread by smoke. Look at the pictures, look at the videos, and understand what's happening. Now, that Rocketdyne vegetation that burned certainly had more than the average vegetation. But all vegetation on the West Coast and inland, how many states, maybe all of them, we don't know, are 8 years exposed almost to radiation. So they all have varying amounts. It's thought that Rocketdyne has even more. All right, so we've got toxic smoke, Dane. That's all there is to it.
Jeff, how many people, I'm sure you hear it as I do, it's a standard line of denial when people say they wouldn't do this to themselves. So if we look at Fukushima, and as an example, and I know you know the severity of that, obviously more than most anyone, and the fact they're building how many nuclear plants still right now in spite of that one event being a potential global extinction event. So people who rely on that, they wouldn't do this to themselves. If we look at Rocketdyne, we look at the 2,000 plus nuclear detonations, we look at fracking, GeoEngineering. I mean, clearly we're not dealing with sanity. So those that cling to that sort of denial, it's time to wake up. And Jeff, how many people in your circles do you really think at this point are still or are actually aware of the immediacy of how fast the paradigm will collapse on the current course?
It's changing. I know this audience is a very high percentage. They understand we are in the beginnings of an extinction level event. Will it be a thorough, absolute extinction level event? Only time will tell. Fukushima is not getting better. It's getting worse. They will not talk about it at all. So that's part of it. But the geoengineering aspect and the fires and the damage. This is the deadliest fire in California state history now. 42 dead and over 150 still missing. They could all be dead easily. We don't even know. $25 billion in the Paradise Fire, the Camp Fire they're calling it. The Paradise Camp Fire, $25 billion. Now maybe they're including the Woolsey Fire, I don't know, down south. But these will not be the last. As Dane said on this program, and as he says on his own site and in his presentations, which are brilliant, and I would urge all of you, if you get a chance sometime, don't miss them. They're going to get to be more and more common, these fires. As the ground dries out, the plants dry out. It's all a tinderbox now, Dane. We could have one next week that could be just as bad or worse than the Paradise Fire. We don't know.
It is. And you hear the narrative, Jeff, that, well, there's just this abundant fuel, the official narrative from Washington, we're not cutting down enough trees. That is absolute nonsense, as you know. Let's take statistics from Siberia, forests that have been untouched for millions of years. The fire burn down, amount of acreage being burned there in the last 10 years has escalated 1,000%. Those forests have never been touched.
Right.
So that's where the narrative of we're not cutting down enough trees falls apart. And I know this firsthand. I've done 6 cost share programs, 3 state, 3 federal, on an industrial scale, on my own habitat preserve. My father was an arborist. I've done this. I've done this my whole life. The bottom line is conditions are horrifically different. Jeff, you've probably heard people say, well, there's more undergrowth because we had so much rain last year. That's absolute nonsense. There wasn't that much growth here at all. The rain dried out immediately afterward. And the bottom line is the forest fuel moistures are lower than they have ever been in recorded history. So that's the core of the problem in regard to the fire burn down. So let's look statistically to give an idea of the immediacy. We know we're losing 200 to 300 species of plant, animal, and insect a day. We know we've had about an 80% global terrestrial insect population collapse. Aquatic insect populations are in a similar vein right now. Statistically speaking, we've lost 60+% of Earth's wildlife in the last 40 years. On the current trajectory for wildlife die-off, the 0 hour point, if that rate of die-off does not increase, and it is increasing, we're looking at 0 hour, no wildlife left, 2026 on the current course. Now, that should drive home the immediacy of what we face. No habitats, no humans. Our UV readings indicate at the current rate of ozone destruction. And if you see an article that says the ozone layer is getting better, that's complete propaganda. So, and the current trajectory of ozone loss, we're looking at about a similar date, 2025, 2026. These are converging cataclysms that are existential threats. So what I'm trying to point out to people, we need to prioritize. We need to focus on the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat. Certainly Fukushima's in that category. Climate engineering also, because it's destroying the atmosphere. If we have a large CME, as you know, Jeff, that could create 100 Fukushimas or 200 if it shuts down grids and they go into meltdown. And that's directly related to climate engineering. So so many roads lead back to climate engineering as the greatest, most immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm.
You know, these big, huge burnout, 200 square miles and all that, when it will rain, and it will rain, will lead to what? We're going to have mudslides, we're going to have other problems. This is all predictable. The damages aren't over now. And some areas that get burned off really never get a chance to grow back. Like a lot of Southern California areas burn every 4 or 5 years, it seems. We have almost a sort of a dust bowl orientation. We have such a low moisture rate now, all up and down the West Coast. Except maybe Washington State. And you said this is maybe unprecedented. This is an all-time low.
Forest fuel moistures are at all-time record low, and you're exactly right about not growing back, Jeff. Let's look at our statistical rate of seedlings planted here where I live. Our success rate about 12 to 14 years ago was 95% of the seedlings planted would make it through the first year. Success rate now is zero. Nothing makes it through the first year.
All dead. Wow.
Nothing lives through the first year. And these fires are so hot, it's creating hydrophobic soils. It's sterilizing the soils. So anybody's notion that the forest...
that's important. Hold on. Sterilizing the soil. The soil, remember, everything you see growing if you want to think about it this way, actually interacts with and grows and calls home about the first only 4 to 6 inches of surface soil. Below that, you'll get rock, you'll get shale, you'll get things that have no appreciable organic matter. It's in the first, even, let's just say 2 to 6 inches. That's where most everything grows. Believe it or not. That's the truth. Now, if you get a superheated fire working that soil over, what happens to all the bacteria in it? All the other growth and organic elements in it? They go sterile. They die. This is what Dane's saying. Give us a little bit more on that. That's really important.
Well, you're exactly right, Jeff. What you described on the importance of the soils. What we're also seeing, because the microbes are being killed off, even when the precipitation falls because of the bioavailable metals in it, that's also killing soil microbes. So
yes.
So we are not seeing on the forest floor the normal rate of decomposition that we should see. Leaves, sticks, biomass sit there intact all winter long. They're not deteriorating because there's no microbial activity occurring because the soils are sterilized.
They need to be wet too. Absolutely. Yeah.
They
no
do.
Moisture,
they
no
do.
Microbes. Wow, what
Correct.
an important concept.
Correct.
Wow.
So this is you start to break down these changes. It's a cascading effect, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So the forests are simply dormant, ghost forests. Our firs down here. I know you're losing trees there too. We're losing trees at a horrific rate here. Bottom line is, again, they have the noose around our collective necks. The geoengineers decide when it will rain, how much it will rain, how toxic that rain will be. They literally have us by the collective throat.
Gee, it's almost like politics, deciding who wins and by how much. Don't laugh.
Exactly, no, that's true. I'm with you completely.
Even Trump today said that it's impossible to have an honest election in Florida anymore. He said an honest vote is no longer possible in the state of Florida. He's right. It's so bad.
It is, and I hope people get past the power-structured scripted theater, the political theater that is distracting so many people from every side of the fence.
It's all about misdirection. Disinformation, misdirection.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Exactly. So we do not have much time on the current course, and I can't stress that enough. Again, we're importing $40+ billion worth of food from countries abroad that are starving to death themselves to keep our store shelves stocked. How long does anybody possibly think that can continue? The existential threat is here. It's not off on the horizon somewhere. So what we need, Jeff, is people to help us to share awareness on a grassroots level. GeoEngineeringWatch.org, because of our site traffic of 32+ million, we're at the top of a Google search for the term geoengineering. If you search geoengineeringwatch.org, of course, you'll still find our site, but we were the top of a Google search for the term geoengineering.
Let's hope they leave you there.
We are gone. We are
gone
no.
from
19 pages. From 19 pages, we are Google has completely eliminated our homepage from 19 pages on the subject. From
I was
top
worried.
Of the page
I was
to
right. Gone.
Yep. Exactly right.
You look up a lot of things on many sites, and they're gone as well. We are in the hands of people. We are in the hands of a consciousness of evil that is censoring, scrubbing, shadow banning, outright banning, destroying people who are simply trying to present reality. This is a crime. Hey, what? You're telling the truth about the climate and what's going on this planet. And Google doesn't see that that's okay. They don't want that out there. You're gone. Wow.
They don't. We are a non-political site. We don't advertise.
No.
Our posts are not going out to our nearly 100,000 YouTube subscribers. If you search any of our articles, our own articles don't come up from our site. They'll come up from another site, but not from ours. So there's a banning across the board with geoengineeringwatch.org because this is a subject that's being searched all over the globe. And it was certainly something they didn't want to have our website exposing the true nature of climate engineering and the decimation it's doing at the top of a search on the subject. So they simply eliminated us completely from a search on the geoengineering term.
I'm sick. I'm sorry. This is disgusting. It's out of control. And where is the leadership in our alleged political process? This government that is supposed to protect, serve, and represent the interests of the electorate that put it in there. Well, they're doing nothing. They won't talk about any of this. They are afraid of their own shadows. Well, first of all, they're owned before they even get in, or they wouldn't get in. And most everybody knows that. International globalism, international banking, international finance, big business, big states, big corporations own these people, or they would not be in office. So we can't expect from them that which they will not give, and they won't give it. Once they're in, they're close to the money stream. They can dip in anytime they want. They're set for life, so they're not going to do anything to jeopardize that. It's really a very broken, and I would almost suggest an irreparably damaged system. The biggest political party in America is the AIPAC party. If you don't believe me, I know all of you listening get it. Look it up and understand what the influence is here. It's huge, huge. So we're not in good shape. And when you add up the fact that the radioactivity and the terrible weather modification going on is combining to literally create an ELE, an extinction level event, and you don't see that in the news, and you better get worried, and you better, as Dane said, one-on-one, a populism of news sharing, information sharing, factual sharing. We've got to help those who want to know, because we're being shut out. The mainstream media won't tell us anything. Now Google and now the Internet is beginning to shut the doors on more and more vital news services just like yours. Wow.
They are. And this is where sharing printed, very compelling with printed data with visuals. This is at the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. There are free downloadable links to our flyers, to our 20-page booklets. People can print them themselves if they choose. We offer the printed material for our cost of printing in mass volume. We put it out for our approximate cost of producing and shipping just to get it into circulation. But sharing the links from your own home computer without any cost at all can be very, very productive. People need to see that visual, condensed, solid, verifiable, factual building block data, and it's all there, and we need to share in that manner. That's much more effective than, again, pointing at the sky and ranting. So, but this effort requires all of us, Jeff. These issues are not going to go away. They're manifesting by the day, and we do not have much time.
No, we don't. I don't leave home. I have your data, your flyers and your booklets in my car, and I give them away to people who are intelligent, who are interested. Unfortunately, many aren't, and that's to their great well, it's a sad commentary on them. I'll leave it at that. But I've got them, and I do give them away, and people are... In fact, one guy came back and says, can I have a few more of those? He was that amazed. So, well done.
Well, it's a team effort. And one thing people need to realize as well, you can put many things in your rear view mirror, if you will. 9/11, many people have chosen to put in their rear view mirror. Fukushima, they think is in their rear view mirror, even though it's in front of the grill still. It's not going away. That's obviously getting worse by the day. But with the climate engineering, because it's so blatant at this point and manifesting so radically, you can't hide that much longer. So if people should understand, even if they have resistance from those around them to sharing such data, know that those people will be forced to wake very soon as conditions continue to worsen. So it's up to us to push past the resistance, share the data, plant the seeds, and continue to do so until we can get this issue to surface. Here's
a quick question. I've had other people ask me this too. I try to explain it to them. Let's hear your expert explanation. Right before it's going to rain, let's say 2 to 3 days usually, is when they begin to spray again. What are they up to?
Those are desirable conditions for them. It's a AR, atmospheric river, as you have low pressure coming in, which can be rising air, helps to keep the particulates aloft. You have more moisture for them to adhere to. So it's a very advantageous scenario for them to seed more heavily. Migrates it further inland. Also presents too many condensation nuclei for that rain to form. So, Jeff, how many times have you seen the rain's forecast, but it comes late and comes less?
Oh, yeah.
How many times?
Too many to count.
So they've taken that moisture, they broadcast precipitation that should have fallen on the West Coast into the widest possible, mostly rainless cloud canopy to cover as much real estate as they can. That's solar radiation management. So it's extremely counterproductive for the planet as a whole, obviously, but again, they're invested in this insanity. They're going to keep it up and keep expanding it until we, the people, realize we're fighting for our lives, take to the streets with information, pitchforks, and torches if that's what people feel they need to do to protect their lives. But the bottom line is we have to hold agencies, media, elected officials, they must be held accountable. This issue has to be brought to the light of day.
Please go to geoengineeringwatch.org and share the links. And if you can, buy some of the flyers and booklets. You got an extra $100. Dane he's not making a penny on this. It's done for a public service. They are so stunning. I've given them away to a number of people, and people, they just stare at them like they're in shock, showing the spraying, the geoengineering in the sky. It's remarkable. All right, Dane, look, we'll stay in touch. It's not going to go away soon. We're going to be doing this same kind of program in the future with more horrific fires. It's so dry out there now. Even a couple of good rains isn't going to do much.
Not much, Jeff. But hey, I appreciate your time and your listeners helping us to try to reach a critical mass of awareness as soon as we can, Jeff. We'll keep doing our best on this end. Thanks, Dane. Take care. All right. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Dane Wiggington. All right, geoengineeringwatch.org, and we'll be right back.